John C. Pollard, welcome to the LYHL podcast. It's such a pleasure to have you here. We have a lot of catching up to do and even a bit of like getting to know you, Ness, because we had adjacency from, we're going back over a decade prior to when I moved to Los Angeles. So we know each other from my days in Wisconsin in a faith community. But I'm just so glad you're here. We've kind of reconnected on social media recently, and I've just been enjoying our interactions. And I just look forward to just hearing from you what you have to contribute.
Thanks so much for having me, Elle. I am thrilled to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Awesome. Well, let's get right into it. So, first off, how would you describe your work and vocation?
Well, it's kind of a loaded question, or at least it seemed like it. So I looked up the meaning of vocation again because that is something I have struggled with my whole life, really.
Hmm.
And the definition that I found was a strong feeling or of suitability for
Suitability. Oh, okay.
ability for a particular career or occupation. And I said, okay, well, then I can answer that because for me, that has always been music. I love
Hmm.
music. I studied music. I studied music in college, in fact, but I spent most of my life working in corporate America in various marketing roles, and only in sort of the last 3 years have I decided to really pursue that vocation in sort of I don't know what the word is, but uh, in earnest, I guess, to
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
take that seriously. And some of that was precipitated as there's always triggering events, right, in our lives that sort of um, take us down a different road. And for me, my dad died sort of a slow death to cancer.
Hmm.
And, so you're just faced with mortality. And I've always been aware of my mortality. But I think that his just watching that happen and going, well, we're all going to end up in the grave at some point, and thinking about what I really want out of life. And that's sort of what, made me that and I had sort of a back injury. So I'm actually interested. I got
Hmm.
a lot to talk about related to a healthy life because a back injury when I was laying on my back, because there's nothing I could do and just like watching, clips and, hanging out and I just was like, I just sort of asked myself, what the F are you doing with your
Hmm.
life? What are you doing? And that was sort of when I committed to do what I really feel like I was made to do. I felt like, I mean, if I look back at my journals, I can go back 20 years and find journals that talk about making music. So that's what I think my vocation is. That was maybe a long-winded answer.
No, I mean, this is the bulk of, because so part of, I don't tell you when I give you the questions like, hey, this is what we're going to talk about. I don't talk about my intent other than like I love these conversations, but um and you're like looking at and kind of analyzing the questions because people take it in whatever way they take it. But vocation was like I wanted to give you pause because it's not like the question is not how do you make a living? The question is not like how do you, and I haven't yet, but I do hope to have, somebody that their work is, just volunteering or their work is raising their family. And that is work and vocation, I think is kind of calling, which is, so it's like this suitability, right? It's like what kind of naturally comes out of you that is kind of yours to give. So, to me, this isn't like a small question that, oh, let's just get to know John C. Pollard a little bit. It's like, no, like it's kind of like show us a bit of your heart, show us a bit of what's important to you. But that's a little bit hard to come in to say, well, first question, show us a bit of your heart.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And that's actually, and I missed it in the intro, but when I think of you, I do think about music, even though you're saying, well, I was maybe a lot of your time was spent, in marketing, working for whatever businesses. That's how, I remember you, yeah, just, playing the drums, at church, or playing, just gigging. I just remember you gigging like all the time with friends that I know that you're still, based on, yeah, I know that you're still out,
Yeah.
involved in creative projects with. So I identify you that way for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and so do I, and I think the idea of vocation and that struggle, and for many creative people, and I think yourself included, the sort of thinking about where the money comes from, and time, and how you balance that all in a healthy way, is that's something that I'm spending a lot of time thinking about right now, because
Hmm.
I'm still working, albeit fractionally, in a marketing role, or actually a couple marketing roles,
Hmm.
but then trying to use that other time and taking advantage of that time to um, and be very intentional about the music. So
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And we chatted a little bit before we started the recording, and I shared that, yeah, that my how I spend my time is shifting, like how I'm, having been in healthcare for so long, and even that's evolving as I do that, like shifting away from, physical therapist, to more coaching, and even a broader, so within that, okay, movement coaching, but even within, or expanding beyond, you'll see that, like, I would worked as a physical therapist, but none of these questions are like, tell me about your physical health, or what's your exercise routine, or like, what do you eat? Like, these kind of conversations come up in this, but it's really, physical health is just one component. And so for me, it's like, to think about, like, what is a life well lived, is, like, to me, like, the most interesting question. So the idea of like life coaching just seems so natural to me, to partner with people and have conversations like this, and then figure out, well, how do you take the next steps towards that. And and then I'm doing that as well, which in some of the more scary parts is like to start to call myself, or to step into, um, being an artist. And that's a broader category than saying, which previously, I'm a photographer, or I'm a writer, like all the different hats, because I think just inherently everybody's creative, and we just have different, expressions of that. I would love to hear anything that you, if there's more that you're, willing to share about, like, what in music, like, either, I'm seeing like different things, and to me they're all related, is like, what about music gives you life, and then like, what makes you like want to share it, like, what do you feel like, if you can, if we can look under the cover a little bit.
yeah, there. I think I don't think I fully understood what music, like I don't
Mm,
understand. I didn't understand. I just liked it, and I always felt good, and I knew the power of music, because you go to concerts, or even like, I mean, I was, you could go to a variety show or whatever, like something that, or something more Broadway-esque, or something like that, and the music is doing things to you
yeah.
inside that you don't understand.
Mm-mm.
And it's all about the feeling. And you get this feeling and you think, oh man, I wish I want to make people feel like this. And
Mm.
I love, like, for me, practicing and getting better at instruments and my voice, like all of that, is, I love that. I could
Mhm.
I could spend the whole day if I didn't have to make money. I I no problem. I could block out my whole day and just move from drums to guitar to voice, doing warm-ups, doing scales, doing, just trying to get the most authentic, natural, relaxed, um, delivery of this of me as a human being. And
Mm-hmm.
so, but what really has been helpful is I came across about a year ago a speech, and I'm gonna forget the person's name, but I'll give it to you. We'll get it to you for the
Yeah, I
show
can put it in
notes.
the notes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah, actually, you know what? I'm just gonna look it up because I got it here in my notes. And this um, this professor of music was addressing freshmen at the Boston Conservatory of Music.
Mm.
Um, and let's go there. Yes, okay. Thank you. I appreciate your patience. Carl Polnack, who was a pianist and director of music at Ithaca College, but was addressing freshmen at the Boston Conservatory. And I won't go into this um, talk, but it's probably a 5 minute talk or something. But he does such a great job at explaining why we need music and why music
Mm.
is valuable. Like why,
Mm-hmm.
and he's talking about concentration camps um,
Wow.
where it's a very famous piece was written in a concentration camp and played for its first audience. The piece is, I think it's called The Quartet for the End of Time by Cezanne. I think that's
Wow.
Cezanne. And I don't speak the French, but anyway, it's really power. It's a really powerful piece. Anyway, but this whole talk really, I was like, oh yeah, that is why we do this. And I think for me, um, because of some of I've got a variety of voices in my head, and
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't, in the past, I would have thought they're not healthy voices. And
Mm-hmm.
we can talk about this more too, because now I'm learning that maybe they are healthy voices. I just need to learn how to interact with them. But
Mm-hmm.
now that was like, oh, this is valuable. This is worth doing. This is worth, because as a creative person, we think, why, it feels like a luxury. It feels like, who what privilege do I have that I can just sit around and write songs? Or if you're a painter, like just sit
Yeah.
around and paint. Or if you're a
Yeah.
poet, just sit around and just string words together. Like, it seems so self-indulgent. But
Yeah.
this talk really made, like, he was talking about it almost as a way of saving the world. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I needed that to
Like the permission.
yes, that it has value,
Mm-hmm.
and that
Mm-hmm.
it's not just a hobby. It
Mm-hmm.
has some intrinsic value that, I mean, and it can be a hobby. It still has intrinsic value. And
Mm-hmm.
that was really important for me, and I hope everybody will go, if you're at all a creative person, particularly a musician, look up that talk and read it because it's so powerful.
I can't wait to look that up. I'm like taking notes, writing that down. Yeah, I think it's like you're exploring this question that I think anybody that's doing the vulnerable work of creating, of um yeah, like we have these various voices, like that maybe there is a voice. It sounds like possibly there's a voice that's kind of saying like do something serious, do something worthwhile, like there's whatever iterations of that, uh because yeah, what you're doing is, yeah, like, oh, a hobby or play, or it's which is just kind of say that it's not essential. And that was actually part of my upbringing. I don't know, when you go back to your childhood and things that were formative to you, like where, because it's always very interesting to explore where the thoughts that we have and the beliefs that we have, uh, where they come from. I spent a whole book doing that, and I could still, there's so many layers, and I think I explored 20 to 25 different things in that, and then just being like, oh, do I really believe that thing? Because these are things that are shaping how I orient myself to the world and how I interact. And so I used to not, and I think this was handed to me. I don't think I came up with this on my own. I don't know, but I didn't think art was very important. I didn't think fiction was important. Like I didn't think music was, it was just, and not to say I didn't do it. I played an instrument. You get to start doing it in, at least when I was in public school, right around fifth grade. It's like you get to pick an instrument and do it. And I, played the trumpet for a time, and stopped when I had to start sight reading. I was like, oh man, I gotta like practice. I don't know. Had I had the saxophone, I think it would have been different, because again, there's something important to like doing that thing that like wants to come out of you. And so I've had to deprogram, and it's still such a work, especially. So here I am claiming this title of artist, because if I'm true, like the more I'm with myself, the more I find that there's things that arise out of me. And the more I spend time with myself, the more I'm like, whoa, it's not even just photography, what I thought it used to be. Like I have these words, I have these ideas. That's been like a decade of like, well, what do I do with this? I don't know. And I feel like it's a pretty good, like if I read that in a book, I'd be like, wow, like that's my perception of it. Like, but oh, it's just a snippet, or it's a putting together like some kind of understanding of the world. Like, okay, so writer, and then like so recently I've written songs for a long time. When I very first picked up the guitar at like age 20, my history with the guitar, the acoustic guitar, is just I don't really play other people's songs. I think that's not really my thing. It's much more kind of like what wants to come out. And I've been leaning into that and working on my voice as well, because I've played in my bedroom or like in the living room, and starting like tomorrow night I'll go out to the park across the street and I'll just play and sing, and I do this every week now just to practice a
Yeah,
bunch of things, right? It's the
love it.
performing component, the projecting, the can I handle different things happening, the distraction, because there's so many things that, just with even being a musician or performer, right, that you have to knowing like on the where your fingers are on the fretboard, and being able to like scan around, and oh, somebody's walking up to me. What, do I keep playing? Do I like people are doing things in the world, but I feel like I'm covering a lot of ground. I hope I'm not losing people too much, but I've had to change. But here I am doing the work of like leaning into being an artist. Now I like can sit down and I can write a poem like that. And I'm like, I was like, okay, I guess I'm a poet. Like I didn't know that. But so what is what is my question there for you? I think,
Well, first, it's great that you can just
yeah.
say, I'm a poet. It's beautiful that you could say, for years, I don't think I would have ever introduced myself as a musician. I would have
Mm,
introduced myself as a marketer,
correct.
or,
Mm-hmm.
because I assume because of the circles, you're at an event or something. What do you do?
Mm-hmm.
Blah, blah, blah. Now I'd say I'm a musician,
Yeah.
and getting comfortable with the fact that you're an artist, you're a poet, I'm a writer, whatever, like being
Mm-hmm.
comfortable saying that and actually
Yes.
believing that, that's
Yes.
that's work on its own. And
Correct. Yeah.
because again, the sort of I would say the lie that we've told ourselves is that those things are not acceptable and not
Mm-hmm.
worthy, not valuable to society, except in the bohemian, circles.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The, the rest of the world doesn't see value in that. So I think that's great that you can say I'm a
Mm-hmm.
poet and I'm a songwriter and I'm a
Yeah.
singer.
Yeah. 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 Um, I think we're touching on things that I think that we'll continue to touch on and explore. But let's go more into like exploring this topic of like healthy living, what it means to live a life well. So what do you think it means to live your healthiest life?
Yeah, this was great. This was great to sort of think about and reflect upon. And when I first sat down to just sort of I don't know if I was going to journal or just reflect on it. The first thing that came to mind was to know yourself. So it's sort of to
Mm,
understand yourself. And so that speaks sort of to um, probably the mental health side of health. And so if I
mhm,
had to, if I summarized, if I wanted to give you a nice tidy answer, and then we can drill into this, but
mhm,
I think that the healthiest life is this combination of mental health, physical health, and spiritual health. And
mhm,
so, and I think it's interesting that you went from sort of focused on people's physical health into a broader coaching environment, because I think that's ultimately what we need, right? Is this more holistic
correct.
um, view of health? Because, I mean, if you've read The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel, I forget,
Mhm,
and something, Bessel Van something.
mhm,
Um, this idea, like physically, we hold so many things that are related to our mental health, or it can be how we see ourselves, it could be trauma that we had, and all those sort of things. So addressing physical symptoms alone is not going to create somebody's healthiest life.
right.
Um, so I think I think the mental game is key, and understanding so actually they're all key, right? Mental, physical, and spiritual. And if we can look at maybe where we've had some injuries, whether it's physical, mental,
Mm,
spiritual, and then we can look at how we have compensated uh,
mhm,
because of those injuries, that often helps us. And if we can look at all that with a little bit of curiosity, then that can help us maybe understand where the work is that we might need to do. Um, to go back to laying on my back, um, this was the second year in a row that at that time, this was 2 years ago now. At that time, I was laying on my back, and this was the second year that I had the symptoms of a slip disc, basically. And so, and this probably related to drumming, but it's related to a lot of things. It's related to trauma from football injuries, knee injury, you know what I mean? All sorts of things.
mhm,
Like, and then of course, maybe it's related to your posture and things like that. But I got in contact with a trainer that specializes in a neuro-based approach to pain and to train, to overall strength and performance training. And so, if you're familiar with Z Health Education, it's this whole series of basically where you're working with the nervous system to
mhm,
help your body feel safe, because
yeah.
pain is often an area where your body is saying, "Hey, I don't like what's going on there. I want to stop
Mhm,
that because I don't feel comfortable with that." And it's about
mhm,
remapping your joints and your nervous system so that your body feels like, "Yeah, I can do that. I understand that. Everything's cool." And so actually, it's really fascinating just to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole. I
sure.
mean, if you understand your nervous system at all, you have inputs like vision and vestibular and proprioception, right? These are things you're familiar with, right?
Yes.
But
Yep.
you can fix, like I relieved pain in my back by doing eye exercises. Eye exercises were critical to fixing
Mm.
my body. It was mind blowing to me that I could do
Mhm,
the exact. I was like, "What is happening?" And then, so I got into this so much that I actually took a course, and I would be certified in this R phase, which is all about sort of the rehabbing joints and things like that. I haven't taken the test yet, so I can't say that I'm certified, so I won't say
okay.
it. It's really
Okay.
fascinating. Like, so, you can be doing thumb exercises, or, finger exercises, neck exercise, moving your cervical, your thoracic spine, and these things can have an impact on how your body feels. So, all of this, whether mental, physical, or spiritual, is about safety. So I think if I had
Mhm.
to sum
Mhm.
up the healthiest life, it's a life in which we feel safe. So on, when I think about interpersonally, like am I in an environment where I feel safe to be vulnerable and to share those thoughts, and where the way I'm talking to myself about myself, where I'm safe, and I am compassionate with myself, and I can come at that. And so the same thing, physical is a little more obvious. Like again, with back to the nervous system is about, am I safe to make that movement? Do I feel comfortable making that movement? And we can help our body do that through a number of ways. Now, on the spiritual side, one of the things that I've really grown over the years, when we met, we were in a very evangelical setting. And
Mhm.
over the years, I've kind of sort of grown away from that particular perception of God and how I see God.
Mhm.
Um, and some of that, and one of the things that never sat right with me, and please don't come at me, everybody, but let's just talk about it, is this: there is on in this area, there's this concept of depravity and a broken,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
and I never, I could never connect with that fully, even though I was so on fire for the Lord, and so just I wanted to be a great disciple. And but that concept of being broken
Mhm.
is not, I think, healthy. I don't think
Yeah.
we can
Yeah.
see ourselves. If we think of ourselves as broken, we're going to be broken.
Yeah. Yeah.
If we think of ourselves as made in God's image, if we think of ourselves as good, and if our view of God is that God has our back, that God is
Mhm.
love, that
Mhm.
God is good, and
Mhm.
we can point, look, we can point to all sorts of references about all the different ways that God is portrayed in the Bible. But um, but I'm going to stick with the one where God is love, and I'm going to stick with being made in His image, and that's, and also like sort of reading scripture from other religions has helped too to broaden my perspective. When I think of, and I was reading over the last couple of years from the Upanishads and from some of the Buddhist scriptures, I can't even remember um, which ones, but I was reading and I'm thinking, this is beautiful. This is good. This is like a healthy way to see things, and they're not, in my opinion, they're not mutually exclusive. And so, now when I think about my spirituality, I would say that my spirituality is evolved, and I still want to be like Jesus, but
Mhm.
I'm not. Uh, there's a lot that of baggage in the American version of Jesus, let's say,
Yeah. Oh
that
yeah. Yeah.
especially right
Mhm.
now, that I don't have anything to do with. And
Mhm.
so, and let's not go there, but uh, I think, and if we think of God, and I also understand why, if you're listening to this and you don't like the word God, and
Mhm.
I understand why people don't want to say God and why they say the universe and they talk about the
Mhm.
universe. Thinking
Yeah.
about
Agreed.
God, or
Mhm.
the universe, and why, and that the universe has your back, that God has your back. For me, that's sort of one and the same, but I can understand why you would say universe, because it's just carried so much baggage in recent years and so much unhealthy baggage. So
Mhm.
that's a lot of words. So it's a balance. If
Yeah.
I have to
Yeah.
sum it up, I think it's a balance of the mental, the physical, and the spiritual. It's about safety. It's about understanding ourselves, and maybe where we've, because of that trauma, have made some unhealthy compensations that we need to explore and try to work out those compensations so that we can get back to the true self, to our
Mhm.
true, who we are, who we were made to be, which
Mhm.
is there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would love to hear more. Like you led off right away with know yourself, which is two words. It's easy, straightforward. Uh, like, And then you came back to it just now. But I think there's still like, is there any, and you can share, I do, and part of why I have various people on here is to that hopefully there is like a personal side to this versus like a, we can stay really in our head. But like what what does that like what is the process of knowing yourself? So you talked about injuries and like traumas and earlier you were before we talked about this question, part of knowing yourself was kind of like this vocation, like this suitability, like know yourself is such a big thing. Like
Well, yeah, so you gave me a broad question. I gave you a broad answer to start with.
yeah. Well,
But
just yeah, whatever.
yeah, so okay. Yes, I think there are a lot of layers to that question, and I think um I so I think that for us to grow, if we're interested in growth, then I think we have to do some self reflection. We have to
Hmm.
sort of get inside of ourselves a little bit. So that
Hmm.
is one thing that I think and a couple years ago, I spent a lot of time digging into a practice called centering prayer, which is actually kind of a I think that was a Catholic Franciscan dude that sort of was a big um, proponent of this, and it's really it's a type of meditation, and that was
Hmm.
very I saw immediate benefits to that, and so I think that going in, so I'm a little bit of a and I'm a contemplative. I'm that type of person. So not everybody wants to. There are a lot of people. Let's put it this way: some people are afraid of that, and because they can't stop the mind from going, they're um, they can't sit in silence,
Hmm.
um, and it's really tough. But if you can, oof, I think there's
Hmm.
so much goodness. And I'm gonna just add another whole new direction that I've just
Hmm.
stumbled upon recently because I'm again, well, knowing myself. Okay, I'm also a learner. So, and some of that is healthy and some of it's unhealthy because as a learner, you think you can buy into the thing, I'm never good enough, I'll never be good enough, so I got
Hmm.
to learn, I got to practice harder, I got to practice, I'm
Hmm.
not good enough to
Hmm.
do, I'm not good enough to put that song out yet. I'm not yet quite ready to do this. And so you could get a little unhealthy in that way.
Hmm.
But on
Hmm.
the other hand, you can grow and learn things. And one of my professional connections who had done some work with psychedelics, but also had, been spending a lot of time working on himself, mentioned in a social media post about IFS, internal family systems. Have you ever heard of
Hmm.
it? It's been around
Yes,
since,
not the acronym, but yeah, name recognition. But if you
yeah.
said give me a definition, I'd be like,
So IFS, and I'm in the middle, not in the middle, actually. I'm a couple chapters into a book. It's by Richard Schwartz, and he coined this idea back in the 80s. And it's this idea that we have that those voices in your head are actually like, so the inner critic, maybe the achiever, maybe
hmm.
the tough guy, or maybe whatever. We have all these voices inside, and that they're actually not harmful, but they want to be helpful. And so instead of looking at the inner critic as something that is a bad thing, which is how I would say, like when I would tell my story over the last 3 years, I would talk about overcoming the inner critic because
Hmm.
you're not good enough, that sort of
Hmm.
stuff.
Hmm.
And this approach appears to be like, well, let's talk to the inner critic and let's see what the inner critic is trying to protect you from. And so it's this look at these internal voices, and it's about understanding them and seeing if we can come to a place where we give them appreciation, give them space to sort of share with us. I know this probably sounds a little so, on the one hand, it sounds like you're multiple personalities, and he addresses that.
Mhm.
He's like, yeah, well, I mean, you have these different pieces of you. They're parts. He calls
Mhm.
them
Yeah.
parts. These parts. And so his approach is, and again, back to if we take a more positive view of ourselves, instead of looking at these things as negative and say, actually, they're here to help, they're here to do some good. Let's understand that. Let's approach this with curiosity. He has like 7 C's in his model, which I don't have memorized, but C is one,
Mhm.
curiosity is one of them.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so this is all related to know yourself, right? So
Correct.
let's understand these parts within us. Let's understand what these parts are. They're probably living in the past somewhere.
Mhm.
Oftentimes in our childhood, something happened, or there's something there, and we may need to work through that with our parts to get to the freedom where we can be where our self can be fully expressed, where our self sort of takes leadership over the parts instead of letting those parts sort of push us into unhealthy behaviors. We become,
Mhm.
we find ourselves, we express ourselves, we embody ourselves. Embodiment is a word
Mhm.
that seems to
Mhm.
is if you're thinking about somatic movements and things like that, which I'm also curious about and interested in understanding that the mind body connection.
Mhm.
Um, it's all related. So anyway, I think that's the sort of internal, and that's just an example. I mean, maybe
Correct.
there are
Yeah.
ways to do this, right? There are other ways to come at that, but and that's what one of the things, because I'm a learner, I've taken so many courses and so many things, and like I'll explore anything. Like
Yeah.
you give me some
Mhm.
crazy woo woo, what sounds crazy woo, I'll listen to it.
Mhm.
Let's see what it is. And what I think I'm coming to is, don't necessarily take everything literally, but it's a metaphor and it's a way of looking at things that in some cases is going to be helpful. And if it's not, you just say, okay, well that whatever, for
Mhm.
whatever reason that I couldn't get my head around that. I couldn't resonate with that. But if it does, then even if you're thinking about your parts and you're having a little conversation with these people inside of you or whatever, well, of course that sounds crazy to the I know I shouldn't use that term. It doesn't sound rational. Let's just say that it
Mhm.
doesn't sound rational. But if it helps you, if it puts it into a setting in your mind that allows you to process some things, to move things around, well, why wouldn't we? Like,
Mhm. Mhm.
let's go for it. Let's try it out, see what happens. And if it works, fantastic.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think I'm gonna make a connection here. My brain has made it, and I'll share it to what you shared earlier about like injury of. So your learner is absolutely coming across, right? Because you had this back pain, you go to this trainer, it's like a different approach, and then well, it's not just neuro, oh, we're going to work on some coordination. It's like, well, let's work on your back pain. Okay. So what I want you to do is, take your eyes and like look that there had to be like an openness within that. And the wild thing is there's just so much that we don't understand about the world. Like how can we so any bit of like reflection, any bit of presence, if you really are being present, you're just like, what? Like, there's a plant right there. Like, how is that? Like, what? So it takes, and you can say, like, oh, yeah, well, it takes, the sun's rays carry energy, and then there's, I'm going back to like what eighth grade. I have to see if I can remember any of this. Like, eighth grade, there's chlorophyll that's gonna, do photosynthesis and it's gonna change this energy. There's like so many there's so many like levels of trust or like just things that are, like I heated up, I had to reheat my tea and I used a microwave. Like what? Like I just push a button, but like, and then it, um, Well, there's energy that travels in microwaves and we whatever. And those are energy, but if you just look at an insect and see how it's moving, or just like your hand, and oh, I'm breathing. Oh, I can see. Oh, I can have a thought. There's so many things that we don't understand. So there's two things I'm trying to say with these various examples. I think pointing towards mystery and miracle. And to me, that's part of what knowing yourself puts you into a different relationship with the world around you and starts to open up the miracle of life and the mystery of life and a tolerance of tension. Because okay, if I sit with myself in whatever way it is, there's so many modalities to do it. My head is pinging around. Oh, well, and there's different modalities you can do. You can, oh, I'm going to try to empty my thoughts. Okay. And then, I'm going to create a distance from my thoughts and have no, a Buddhist kind of detachment from my
Mhm.
thoughts. Or like what you're describing, we can be like, oh, hello. And then you can start to name your thoughts, and like give it oh, this is, Mr. Tidy or something, or, this is Gertrude, or like whatever name that, oh, here, this is my anxiety, this is my fear of failure, this is my pride, this is my, like all
Yeah.
these things. And then the hurts, like you're talking about, that once you're quiet, you might realize, I feel really alone, or like, I feel really, really sad, or oh my gosh, I feel anxious, or whatever these underlying things are. But like when as you start, but there's some kind of mystery. So okay, coming back to the mystery, because we could talk and talk and talk forever, right? You can spend a whole lifetime exploring these things, but there's some kind of mystery. And I completely agree about there's so many different approaches, different ways to grow. There's so many, and embedded in that is different language. And can it be that we're talking about the same thing and approaching the same thing, and just certain things are more useful to different people, or even in different seasons of our life? Like you and I both have commonality of evangelical Christianity in our history, and there were many benefits to that. And there were things that, like, and as life has journeyed, that has maybe allowed us to see that things don't have to, because part of evangelical Christianity was kind of like this. There was a rigidity and
Yes.
I have answers. Like I can show you the way, and like what a privilege it will be for you to be adjacent to me, that I can, that I can point like the way. And so relating to even Jesus differently, right? Whether and I'll stop there, and maybe just a trickle down or fall off. But you're bringing up
Oh,
so many good
it's
points.
so
Yeah.
good. It's so good. And, as you were saying that, I was just thinking about one of my challenges and maybe your challenges for anybody who's creative, right? Is how do I find here's how I see it. I feel like if I'm moved to create this piece, I feel like I'm tapping into that a little bit of that mystery. I feel like I'm a
Yes.
bit of a conduit, right? And so
Yes.
I feel like I'm just participating in this bigger thing.
Yes.
And as a result of that, I also believe that there is somebody that this is going to benefit. This is somebody is going
Yes.
to be moved by
Yes.
this, something like that. And
Yes.
it's maybe it's not unlike that with these different concepts, different psychologies, different approaches to the internal life, and it's about, you know, these people have this unique take on how you see the self, and it resonates with some people and it doesn't resonate with other people, and maybe something else is, and the whole idea though is that if if we are looking, if we are open, if we are, let's, this sounds cliche, awake, we
Mm-hmm.
we would see more of that, or we would be able to
Mm-hmm.
resonate more with maybe the thing that is right for us. And as you were speaking, I also you said some things that were very much. I read a book years ago called The Awakened Brain by Lisa Miller, and she's uh, legit psychologist and stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
she was doing a lot of work on depression and trying to understand depression. But this one of the things that she helped me understand in science is also helping us understand is this connectedness of humans and of the earth, the world. Now let's get sort of Native American here almost. And so for example, she had a study where they had two people who didn't know each other and they sat in a room together and they're internally they were just to focus on connecting. So like I don't know, for 20 minutes or something. They didn't talk to each other or anything.
Wow.
And then they separated them and put them into like electromagnetically locked off rooms. And then at a specific time, unbeknownst to the one person in the other room, they had this person in this room have a thought, and they were monitoring their brains with fMRI.
Wow.
What they found is that this person, and this is all scientific, you can find this. When
Mm-hmm.
this person began thinking this thought, the same spot of the brain in the other person lit up at like 25% of what was happening in the brain of this first person. So so to your point about mystery, to your point
Mm-hmm.
about the bigger picture, to the point of connectedness, and this is something that I was gonna probably get to later, you know, when we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about all these different things that we're learning. But and that's, when I think about connectedness is something that I'm really starting to appreciate more, and it's what really allows us to be a more compassionate human being. And so if I'll go Christian for a second here, if we think about the body of Christ, instead of thinking of that as only people who believe like I believe, but if we thought of the body of Christ as, you know, the world,
Mm-hmm.
we would we would understand that, hey, I play a role in that body. I might be the foot, I might be the hand, and those things that some of us have learned about. But it also means that I'm going to see everybody a little bit differently. They're all part of that body, and they all have a function, and they're all providing a beautiful piece of the pie, so to speak. And so
Mm-hmm.
we'd see things so much differently. And also, if we thought of the world as a part of this too, we would treat the world differently. We'd treat nature differently. And if we understood
Mm-hmm.
also, there's studies about what is the frequency of the earth. And
Mm-hmm.
that frequency is something that you can get to. I don't know, now I'm going way. When we meditate, we change the brain's sort of wavelengths, and you can get into these deeper states of meditation, and then you can get to these altered states of whatever they're different frequencies of vibrations that are going on in your brain. And the earth happens to have like one of those vibrations. So when we meditate, we're actually kind of getting connected to the earth in some
Mm-hmm.
mysterious way, let's say.
Mysterious. Yeah.
I don't know if that's too much for you. I'm sorry, but there's just a lot there's just a lot to think about.
Yeah, no, I so prayer has been a part of my life for a long time, and it was shaped by my upbringing. So evangelical Christian, like what I was told like prayer was. And um I tend to, and I think I did, like I used kind of centering prayer, and now I'll say more like that I probably meditate, but that again is maybe just even being more comfortable with saying that, right? As I like, oh, we're talking about the same thing. Um, but I have a practice of, I started that about 5 years ago, and I found it pretty hard initially. And I started small, And I was really grateful for the how it was introduced to me was kind of like commit to 6 months of this. It was like,
Mm.
don't like just do it and you're gonna be, I'm gonna feel great because your brain is just gonna be uh it's a wild place in there. And to sit and to sit with it, yeah, it can be really really intense. So I don't know, but for sure by 6 months, I not only was I like, I'm going to continue doing this, but I was like, how can I do this twice a day? Like, when else in my day can I do it? Because I was doing it in the morning. And once I pivoted to doing it in the morning, oh, just like the transition to the evening right before bed, that transition to sleep was like, oh my goodness, so amazing. So speaking of being outside, so now I have a habit of I'll go do that in the morning outside. It's part of my morning routine is to go outside and meditate. And I have and it looks like a lot of things, and labels are labels. Like, I don't know, I could maybe explain it to somebody, and one person would say you're doing this, and another person would say you're doing that. But it's so wonderful. And now that I have access to that, um I'm a pretty intuitive person, so I was like, this is like true me, but I'm like, I'm pretty sure we could do some science and it's probably out there, and I'm just not aware of like just being able to get to those states faster and faster, right? Where initially it might take time, but with practice you can just like, which we see, and maybe we can call it maturity, right? It's just somebody that, a toddler like doesn't get what they want, and they're like, but then over time you can learn to deal with like the emotions that rise up within you, the thoughts. And but I do it outside just to be in my senses. Because that was part of even like some unlearning I had to do. Was I was really drawn to nature, but there was, and you talk about embodying it, there was something about evangelical Christianity in quite a variety of ways that I experienced that were more disembodied. And oh, you can go out in nature, but don't get too like close to it, because there's you'll start like worshiping the trees or something rather than worshiping God. But it feels to do, I mean, I love meditation anywhere, but to do it outside. And uh have you ever hugged a tree?
I, not that I can recall, but I'm not opposed. I mean,
Thumbs
I mean,
up. So as a learner, I would, as a learner, somebody, I would just encourage you, and you can go full, and I've done, full embrace, arms wide around, depending how big the tree is. But I encourage you, the bigger the tree is, the more
yeah,
impact you'll feel. The more aged it is, the more, but you can just even a palm on the tree. And if you're, and I can't promise that everybody would feel it, because I've spent 20 years helping people with their physical bodies, and I'm quite aware of how very divorced people are from their body and can't tell how they're breathing, and they can't tell.
right.
So, but if you're in tune with your body and if you touch that tree instantly, like, so, and what is it? And there's science coming out, there's like uh the Mothering Tree. Are you familiar with that book?
I'm not. No,
Do you know it? Okay.
no, no.
Um, I would, there's no shoulds, but highly
Oh,
recommend. I think you would love it. The Mothering Tree, I think it's Suzanne Simard, something adjacent to that, and I can put it in the show notes too.
yeah,
But all the basically trees like have forests, especially like have, it's, we say ecosystem, but they have this whole relationship to one another where they look out for one another. And in their root system, they're linked together to the fungi. So she's a researcher in forestry who then had to get away from forestry because forestry was all about capitalism and cutting down trees and clear cutting
yeah.
things. And so basically the trees are just, and they integrate with mushrooms, the mycelium, and the mycelium acts basically like a brain in between. And then she was finding, I didn't actually quite make it right to the end of the book because I get them from the library. I was like at the very end, and then I had to return it and have it come back. But she was, and but my brain just went like the very last thing. And I'm doing exploding hands if you're not watching the video. Like, that basically, and as somebody that studied, neuroscience somewhat with physical therapy, that essentially there's neurotransmitters that like the trees can communicate to one another and say fire's coming, like, oh, I have the blight, and they can like shut down a tree, or like, oh, I have. So anyway, hug a tree, put a hand on a tree, mystery.
So, fun fact, I'm familiar with some of that research, and I don't know where I heard about it, but I started a song about it, and I have the groove and I have the chorus for it, but it's all about, we cut the trees down, but we didn't realize they were sharing the light. So you know how in a
Mm,
forest, we often thought, oh, we have to cut down the big trees because they're dwarfing the small trees. The small trees can't get the light. And now what they found, just what you were explaining, they are sharing the light that they get. And you're like, to your mind blown sign,
mm-hmm,
absolutely, yes.
mm-hmm,
And here we are as humans once again thinking that we got this figured
mm,
out.
yeah,
Let us tell nature, here we'll help you, nature. And meanwhile, nature's like, look, I got this. I've
yeah, yeah,
taken
yeah,
care of the forest. We've been
yeah.
here for a while. We got this figured out.
Yeah, kind of like, can you just realize that you're a part of nature and not like dominating nature?
Right.
Um, yeah.
Then
You already
maybe,
went in.
yeah,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, 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 no.
I was gonna move us on,
Yeah,
but
you probably.
because I mean, and this is, I love it. I love the animation. We're getting into it. You already talked about it. What you're currently learning. What are you currently learning about living your healthiest life?
So, yeah, do have some notes, and luckily it's not something we actually have uh, touched upon. One of my parts of me is an achiever, so I'm very much I like to accomplish things, to get done with things. So my that leads me to be thinking about getting things done
Mm-hmm.
and filling out a calendar and like sticking to that calendar. And so I think one of the things that I'm learning is, and I just saw a quote from somebody at something on social media, I think it was a cartoon that said something to the effect of, it's not what you do or where you are going, it's about who you are with.
Mm-hmm.
And so this idea of like, I got to get this done and I got to get that, whatever, and I got to go do this or whatever, that's not what it's all about. And then this idea it's more about like, who's in front of me right now, who's with me right now, or maybe when I'm walking my dog, it's not about getting through with the walk. It's about enjoying that time with my dog while I'm walking the dog, and not having that agenda of like, okay, I got to get done with this in 20 minutes because I've got to blah 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 blah. And so this idea of presence,
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I've been on a presence kick for a long time, but it's such a hard thing when you want to accomplish things in life. And then, so I think the thing I'm learning is like, well, maybe it's not about the accomplishments, and maybe it's just about more about
Mm-hmm.
being. And I had a journal. There's a company that makes a journal called the Monk Manual, and I liked the concept of it because they talked a lot about this balance of being and doing. So, we want to be present, but also you want to get the things done. You want to stay organized and blah blah. So it's kind of a journal and a planner and all that sort of stuff. Uh, I like that concept, but I think I need more help being than I do doing because I just naturally am
Mm-hmm.
trying to. And when I
Mm-hmm.
can free myself up, then my
Mm-hmm.
body feels way, you can feel it, right? When you're not,
Yeah.
when I have two adult kids now, and when they were small, I mean, I remember reading them books and thinking, I want to go practice. I want to go do music. I want to do, and I missed the moment, I mean, I still remember the moment, but I remember it with regret because, I'm reading a book to them, but I'm thinking about like, oh, I want to go play the drums or whatever. So
Mm-hmm.
it's about, that's a big thing. Um,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
we already talked a little bit about the connection between the nervous system and, pain. That was a big learning
Yeah.
for me, and just mind blowing. And then here's a sort of random one that I have been. This one's just physical, but have you ever heard of bone rhythm? So the idea of
No.
moving, so it's about, well, there might be different aspects of this, but um, the part that I was reading about was on some kinesiology page, but it was sort of like if you can get your, if you're doing a squat, for example, and you can get your hip and your knee and your ankle all to be moving at the same time. So as you're going down in that squat, instead of like favoring one, one sort of compression more than the other, but actually it's all in synchronicity, that
Hmm.
there's just some, it's just, it makes me feel really good. So I have friends that look at me and I was trying to explain this to other people in the fitness world, and they just looked at me and they said, JP, it seems like you're overthinking a squat. And I'm like, no, no. But my one friend, he understood. He understood the
Yeah, yeah.
real thing, because what's happening when you do a squat is like there's your femurs are rotating a little bit, your pelvis is doing some rotating, and there's all sorts of rotation happening. And when that gets in synchronicity, like they're all kind of doing it at the same time, uh, I think it goes back to safety. It makes your body say, "Oh, I
Mm-hmm.
like that. That's very nice. We're all working together. Things are aligned." And so I find myself, I know you call me a nut. I don't care. Like just practicing a slow squat where I'm just trying to keep those joints moving in synchronicity. All right, that's the rando thing. Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
and then one final thing, which is just back to the presence thing, is just like really just to be okay where I'm at right now. Like I have a lot
Mhm.
of things that I'd like to accomplish before I die.
Yeah.
Um, and so there are things like there's music that I want to make. There's like maybe some courses that I'd like to do a lot about the mind. Getting
Hmm.
yourself create like for creative people, thinking about how do you get yourself into that place where you can feel safe to create and feel confident to create. And also, getting over the am I good enough stuff, because
Hmm.
we're all good enough. And
Yeah,
and somebody's out there that needs to hear it, needs to hear
correct.
your stuff, needs to see your stuff, that needs to be moved by your stuff. So anyway, that's like, but that idea of being okay today, like today I'm, um, working 80% in a corporate job. I'd like that to be non-percent corporate job, and I'd like to spend all my
Yeah.
time doing these other things, but I'm okay. I'm okay with
Hmm.
it. So.
Yeah, yeah. Is there a do you mind sharing any portion of like what that how the process I'm curious, you could share it about any of them, but the process of, oh, just be here, like be here now versus
Mhm.
thinking about something else. Like what is working for you, or what are you trying, or what you like that I tried that didn't work.
Yeah. Yeah, some people would say that's that's dumb. I can't do that. What does that even mean? It's dumb.
Mhm.
If you've ever taken a yoga class and they
Mhm.
tell you to focus on your breath,
Mhm.
there's something beautiful about that, because if you focus on your breath, you can't be thinking about anything else, really. If you're really focusing on your breath, like the
Yeah.
in and the out, and
Mhm.
then so if I'm trying to be in my body, be present, then I think I focus on my breath, and
Mhm.
particularly try to um, slow down the exhale. So I don't know if
Mhm.
everybody understands but there is some science behind this. If you can slow down your exhale uh, in comparison to the speed of the inhale, that sends your nervous system a big signal that says everything's okay, we're safe, and you're fine. So like if you were trying to get into a maybe a more tricky pose or something, and you, rather than sort of pushing your muscles and things like that, if you just focused on your breath and like really stretch out that exhale, just super slow, suddenly you'll feel like, oh, now my body says, okay, I feel pretty good about that. I'm not going to say you're going to
Mhm.
get in the splits, tomorrow because of that or something, but it's pretty noticeable. So I use that if I'm, especially because what happens when we get anxious or nervous or worked up, it's always about the future or about the
Hmm.
past, right? We're either
Hmm.
ruminating on something that happened in the past or we're worried about something that has yet to come. So that breath really, like, just being, what am I doing right now? What I have a sticky on one of my monitors that said, what does this have to do with um oh,
Let's get it. Let's get it. What does it say?
there we go. I got it. Okay. Sorry.
Okay.
What
Yeah.
does this have to do with the agenda of my soul? And
Uh,
such a beautiful thing to think about. Like, you're worked up about work or maybe an argument with something or whatever, but
mhm,
that goes back to where we started, which is vocation. Like, what are you trying
mhm.
to do? And oh, maybe just as a little bonus round here. Um, oh, well, we can cover this in the well, you know what? I'm just gonna say it because I'm here.
Let's do it.
One of the things that was really helpful for me when I decided to move forward with music was um, there's a concept called the three most important questions, and it's by a guy whose name is Vishen Lakhiani, and he is the founder of it's a online learning platform called Mind Valley. It's a lot about
Mhm.
kind of self-help growth and things like that. Mind Valley, but Vishen Lakhiani, and you can find this on YouTube. Um, there's a couple different versions of it, but I'll just tell you the three most important questions so that you know you can think about this. And so the first one is, what do you want?
Mhm.
That's it.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
you think about, okay, well, it might be that I want to put out some albums. Maybe I want to start a this or start a business, or I want to write a book, or what, I want to paint 10 paintings and sell them on the blockchain as NFTs and, whatever. So you do that. And the second question is how do I, how do I need to grow? So I have these wants. How do I need to grow? So that gives you sort of the, um, things that you can actually do to like help,
Yeah.
put that there. The third question is the one that I like the most. And years ago, I was doing sales for a startup company and it was basically out of money and I wasn't getting paid anything. And so I was listening to all these, you know, sales positive Zig Ziglar and I don't know, that name
Mhm.
probably doesn't mean anything to most of you. Motivational stuff, right?
Mhm.
Salespeople have to feed themselves all sorts of motivation. And and Tony Robbins is another name, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah,
This
yeah.
sort of stuff, right? But the one thing that always bothered me about those people is it all seemed very self-centered. And in this three most important questions, the
Mhm.
last question is, what is my contribution to the world? And I
Mhm.
thought, oh, finally a motivational slash self-help slash, inspirational set of questions that I can reflect upon and that actually do what I want to do, which is to leave a positive impact in this world. When you die,
Mhm.
you want to feel
Mhm.
like, yeah, did I do something good with all those wants? Like hopefully those wants
Yeah.
were to have some sort of impact, right? Not just
Mhm.
a fancy
Mhm.
house or a nice car, whatever that stuff,
Mhm.
but to do something with it. So
Mhm.
three most important questions, Vishen Lakiani. He's a good speaker. He's got a couple books too that are, motivational and if you're into that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think I've bumped up to some of probably like in ads, I think actually.
yeah, Mind Valley does a lot of ads.
And
Yeah,
they're like long form ads and I've probably like watched a little bit like what's this about, but it seems very interesting. I do those seem like great questions. To me, I've actually been spending a lot of time on number one, and I think there can be the fear, and I think I was taught this when I was younger that the question should never be what do I want? Because that's selfish. And so I've
Right.
been learning, and I think it's maybe even, and that's part of, I think I attribute to evangelical Christianity. I think there's also Midwest sensibilities that are um, not really oriented to that. And then I think as a female, I think those are some things that I identify. But for me, even now here in my 40s, it's like there's ways that I really don't know what I want. And there's still things that I have to work through of being afraid of that question. And I think some of the things that we even say, and it might be like, oh, I want like the house or the car. I think there's even like if you're quiet and you're like, what do I want? I don't think there's going to be like a richness to it and even like a purity to like the desire to own a home or something, or because it'll be like, well, why do you want to, I think of
Yes.
it's a little bit of like Eckhart Tolle, but it comes from many places, right? Anybody that's kind of doing this work, you'll come to the same place from different directions. He says, follow your bliss, which can just be like, what? I'm just supposed, but like what's really gets you go, like, what do you really want? But there's so many, but there's even very small kind of things like, well, what kind of tea do I want? And what kind of mug do I really want to drink it out of? Because my Midwestern kind of way or like frugality maybe would just be like, well, this mug holds a beverage, it's fine. But like, can I get one that like just feels so good and like that and that's not bad. I think there's so many layers to the question of what do I want that maybe the society we live in that's very capitalistic or things can taint that. But I think when we're asking these questions in a like knowing you're really doing the work to know yourself, I don't think we're in danger of those things. But then you have to kind of release people to do that work and figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really well said. I think that, yeah, if you want a big house in Colorado, is it just because you want to be able to say you have a big house in Colorado, or do you want to bring people together for some purpose, some sort of in nature and blah, that sort of thing. Like,
Yes, correct.
and whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Because you could want to do music. Well, I really want to do music so I can be rich and famous, and and you're still just trying to like feel a hole, right? Versus like, oh my gosh, that miracle, which sounds like we've both experienced that mystery of like when you just sit down and like something just comes out of you, right? And you're just like,
Yeah.
oh, can I keep doing this? Can I keep sharing this? And oh, there seems to be like this invitation to do it more. And if this can just come through me, like what that belief, like, oh, that belief in our interrelatedness of like, well, if this is in me, then why is it in me? Like what's its purpose in the world, which is your question 3. So you
Yeah.
probably like, yeah, not answering those questions in isolation, right? But
No,
mhm.
but no, yeah. But I mean, yeah. No, that's beautiful. That's a great analysis, a great breakdown of those three. Yeah.
Whew, I'm loving this conversation so much, John. What uh, as we bring this home, when you look at the world, what is something that you wish people knew more about living their healthiest life? Uh, you have your own experience. You go through the world, and I believe we all have like these insights. So when we talk about that interplay, so I would love to hear what is something you wish people knew more about living their healthiest life.
I think, and we've covered this a little bit
Hmm.
already, so uh, we don't necessarily have to spend a ton of time on it, but I think that connectedness is really
Hmm.
because I think when we think of ourselves as individuals, um, it's gonna be hard to ever really feel healthy. I think, in all the ways, right? The
Hmm.
spiritual, the physical, and the mental, and even physical, right? There's something about when we do things physically with other people.
Hmm.
There's something beautiful about that. But I think just this. this connection at a level that we just can't understand,
Mhm.
connectedness, interdependence of
Mhm.
humans, ecology, the world, like all that sort of, maybe like I said, maybe more Native American thought, or Eastern maybe, I don't know. But
Mhm.
I think that's really because we would, if we thought of ourselves as connected, we would not be able to other people. We wouldn't be able to take a class
Mhm.
of people or any type of people
Mhm.
and you know, sh- disparage them because
Mhm.
they're a part of us. It's a part of
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
And so um, I think that in terms of like just both making a better world for ourselves
Mhm.
and for everybody, that would probably
Mhm.
go a long way, maybe.
No, I mean, I'm just sitting here because it's like, yes, it's like amen. Like um I have been doing some protesting physically like recently, and like carrying a sign, and the main message, like the top of it reads othering kills.
Mm,
And so you struck a chord with me of, and to me, killing means so many different ways, because it can be, in your family, like when you don't feel like you fit in, or you don't feel accepted, or how we treat our neighbors, or you think of kids in school, like bullying, like all the different levels of feeling like you don't belong, or making other people to either feel like they belong. So it can be this feeling, and there's injuries in that. Like if we relate back to what we're talking about, that we probably can go back. I think it's just part of the human experience. You can go back into times where people just made you, did you get laughed at or ridiculed, or you didn't get invited to the thing because you were made to be like other, like you weren't in the cool group, or you didn't wear the right things, or say the right things, or live in the right neighborhood, all the way to, like, we scale that up to physical violence, or even to like ending somebody's life, and we think about wars or conflicts, and or incarceration, or police brutality, or different things that happen. And um I can't think of a better, like, to me, like what you've shared there is like the ultimate. And it's also, to me, I reflect on, as I try to bring forward, my heritage, evangelical Christianity, and incorporate these other things. I think about, you mentioned God is love, and taking that forward. Like, if God is love, and like love needs to be needs relationship, right? It requires like an interplay. Like, you have to be around others and with others. And then that was something Jesus was asked, essentially, like, who do I have to love? Like, because like the greatest commandments, he was asked that, like, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second is love your neighbor as yourself. And then, of course, the question later on was, well, can you go on about who is my neighbor?
yeah.
And it's right. It was the story, or the parable of the Good Samaritan, right? Who is like a disparaged group from, like, who the Jewish people at the time, how they would have viewed, they were people that were viewed as not godly, right? And in that way, they were made to be kind of like tiered, and so that story, right, is that, and you see all the people, the hierarchy of, somebody's injured the side of the road, um, well, attacked, they're like brutally attacked, like left on the side of the road. And then you have people that are like the holy people that go by, that you would expect. These are the do-gooders. These are the people that, and the person that helps is that Samaritan, that disparaged person, and like what's the end of the parable? It's like, then doesn't Jesus say back, like, who was the neighbor that day, and then makes the, like, turns the question back
Yes.
on the person they asked it. And I think And I think about that a lot these days of like, because when I see, you know, when I see Christians, like, because this is something I've wanted to distance myself from, of like that are doing harm to people, and whether it's words, rhetoric, or um, actions or policies, or supporting wars or things like that. I just like, oh, it like it breaks my heart and causes me to do a lot of internal work to,
Yeah.
okay, how do I relate to this world? Like, how do I reconcile these things? What do I do with these things? What's mine to do? What's not mine to do? How do I find a peace in that? So, um, I for one, really appreciate that and really relate to that. And I don't, and that's just my interpretation of kind of othering. But like literally, not everybody understands that concept. I had somebody say, like, an older gentleman asked me, like, what is othering? But like that idea of, which is probably isn't new, to take, a noun, and to make, we're making it into an
Yeah.
action, like to treat somebody like the other, but now we're just condensing it and say, oh well, othering them, to treat them as different, like that they're not the same as us, when of course, how can they not be? And the closer you get to mystery and miracle, like you're saying, in that interplay. So very, very profound insights. There's so much in that. Thank you so much.
Mm. Yeah. Well, that all of that is deep on my mind. In fact, my next single is about that, and it's taking me a long time. Just it's taking me a long time, but unfortunately, the world still needs to hear that. Hey, we shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to hear some more of your music. I'll definitely drop things in the show notes, whatever you want to provide of how people can get in touch with you. Is there anything you want to share now about how people can get in touch with you, your music?
yeah, I mean, it's all on the socials or on
Uh-huh.
all the streaming platforms. I have 6 singles out there. And so, particularly if you're a creative person, the first single is called Rising, and it's about, sort of that making that decision to go for it. And then the
Mm,
next single after that is about the faith that in yourself that you're going to need to keep going. And then some of the other songs are just songs. I mean, they're good songs. Some of them are songs that I've had over the years that I just wanted
mhm,
to put out that I'd maybe written for a couple that I had written for my daughter.
mm,
And and then the last one is actually sort of a simple love song that I wrote for my wife, which a lot of people like that one. So, I mean, it's
mm.
a love song. But also, a random thing I'll throw out there for
Mm,
those of you who are open in your faith journey, if you are
mm,
open to Jesus stuff, while the pandemic was going on and I was really deep into this centering prayer stuff, I put together a program, a 31-day program. And what it was meant to do was to sort of introduce somebody to this concept of centering prayer, the concept of quiet, basically. But it's 5-minute chunks because
mhm,
I understand that that's really hard for people. And so I had another friend who Andy Geipel's his name. He agreed to make it into an app, and then I enlisted some artists to create. Catlin Carey created art for each day of the 31 journey, and then I created a little bit of poetry, kind of, and then some reflections that maybe you could use. And so what happens is you sit for 5 minutes, and then there's just basically some mostly chill music that you can just be quiet in that for
mm,
just a couple minutes, and then
mhm,
see if that would sort of, I meant it as like a way to dip your toe into this idea of quiet. And I had all sorts of great aspirations of selling and everything, but it's free, but only for, I'm sorry, it's only on iOS. So if you look up 31 Days to a Deeper Connection with God, you'll find this app that you can have on your iPad or your iPhone. And I think it still works. it's been out for a couple of years, and I'm obviously not gonna, uh, I'm not really making any money, so I can't afford to like bother Andy with trying to maintain this, especially as iOS keeps changing. But if you're interested, check that out. On social media, John C. Pollard, whatever channel you're using, is a way to follow. And I mostly mostly talk about music and creativity, but also try to encourage people that struggle with some of the things that I've struggled with, whether that's the
Mhm.
inner critic or, whether you're good enough and things like that, and just
Mm.
try to keep it positive out there, share some stuff. And I'm like
Yeah.
you, I never liked learning other people's music, either. That wasn't interesting to me.
Mm.
But now that I have some songs, and if I want to go play out,
Yeah.
it turns out that people want to hear other people's songs. So
Yeah.
I'm in this process of taking songs that I like, and most of those are older songs, and just doing my take on covers. So
Yep.
that's part of what I'm doing is like learning some covers so that if I want to go out and do a acoustic show somewhere that I could play for an hour or 2 hours, that sort of thing. So I'm learning a lot of things that I just never like to your point. I like to create. I like to write my stuff and that's what I want to do. But if you want to get in front of some people, you gotta give them a little bit of something they know in the meantime. So that's what I'm working on.
John C. Pollard, what a privilege it is to have you here today. Thank you for joining the Lyle podcast. To everyone, may you see the blessing. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Lyle podcast. I'm so glad you're here. If you liked what you heard, you can find me on Instagram and YouTube at the Elle Bottrell, as well as on my website, www.theellebottrell.com. Of course, you can find me back here at the next episode of the Lyle podcast. There's numerous ways to support my work so I can keep helping you live your healthiest life. You can do this financially via links on my website or the show notes, by subscribing to the podcast and YouTube channels, by joining my newsletter community, aptly named the Lyle Newsletter, by rating the podcast, by sharing with others, those you meet, and participating in coaching sessions. It's my passion to help you live your healthiest life. I'm so glad you're here. I'd love to hear your thoughts about what you're learning and the insights you're gaining from these conversations. May you always see the blessing.